Ready? Okay, we'll get started. Today's topic is how to implement a prototype using a variety of prototyping tools, and this is obviously directly for the next homework. So it's Thanksgiving. Hopefully everybody has a nice place to go this weekend for holiday starts on Wednesday. Homework 2 is up on Blackboard. Homework 3 is due right before class. Homework 4 you can start on now, and it's due next Monday. And everybody has to turn in homework 4 on time. And the reason is that homework 5 is a lot of fun. You get to evaluate each other's homeworks, so each other's systems. So what's going to happen is next Monday, we're going to take all of your homeworks that were turned in. We're going to check and make sure on Monday that they actually operate. So that's the TAs are very quickly going to test each and every homework on Monday. Then hopefully by Tuesday morning of next week, you will get an email with 2 of your classmates' systems in it that you will then evaluate for homework 5, and we'll talk about how you're going to do that evaluation next Monday. So if you don't turn in a homework by next Monday, then we can't give your homework to your classmates. We won't give you any homeworks to evaluate for homework 5 either, because that wouldn't be fair. So it's really important everybody get them in on time. I apologize that you have to do this over the holiday, but you can do it today and tomorrow if you really want to avoid working over the holiday. Any questions on the schedule? And then homework 5 also has to be turned in on time, because after you do evaluations of each other's homeworks, we're going to give your evaluations back to whoever's you reviewed, and then they're supposed to fix up their homework based on the reviews. Okay, so that's what homework 6 is. You're going to get 2 of your classmates' reviews, and then you fix up your homework accordingly, right? And so that can't be late either, because that wouldn't be fair to your classmates. They won't get reviews to respond to. And historically, I found that if people don't have homework 3 in by now, they're really pretty hopeless in terms of catching up. So if there's still 4 or 5 people who are way behind, and I strongly recommend that you catch up right away or give up and drop, because it gets to be kind of a race at the end of the class. Okay, so homework 4 that you're starting on today is this implementation. And the goal is to make what's called a wireframe prototype or a click-through prototype. And the idea is that you get a good idea of the interface, and every screen must be pretty much complete, every screen that you show. But it's perfectly fine to have whole sections of your website or your system, your camera, whatever you're doing. It's fine to have whole sections of it not represented. Right? The goal is that for every page that the user sees as part of the tasks that you defined, those pages should be complete. Okay? And if you remember the prototype that we showed before, it looked like a real web page. You clicked on search, you got to another real web page. You clicked on products, you got to another real web page. But all of them were static, hand-drawn pages. Right? So it's really pretty straightforward to pretend that your system works without having to do an awful lot of implementation. Sometimes in years past, students have said, oh, I did 80 pages. Well, if you've done 80 pages, you're doing way too much work. There's no reason it should have anything like 80 pages. Yeah?
So in terms of things doing something, but if you have something that involves like a database, like it doesn't actually have to like complete the form and like send it off. It just has to look like.
Exactly. So the question is, if you have suppose you're pretending to have a database and you have a form to fill in, at the bottom there'll be a submit button or something like that. You can ignore everything the user enters and go to a fixed page. So you don't have to write any scripting stuff. And you can decide as part of your instructions. So one of the things you have to turn in is what's called a README file, or basically instructions. You can say, pretend that the user filled in the name John Doe and his address in Pittsburgh, and then the next page will say, welcome John Doe, here's your order, or whatever, right? Or if you want to pretend that there's an error, That's also a reasonable thing. You can say, pretend he typed in the address incorrectly, and then you show the error page or whatever. Right, so it's basically every button that does something should do something. And typically they'll go to fixed pages, whereas in the real website or the real product, it might compute where to go based on what the user enters. And to the extent that something external is supposed to happen, like if you're pretending to do a camera, then at some point one of the actions might be take a picture, right? So then, or if you're doing a copier interface, then one of the reactions might be a piece of paper comes out of the copier. Obviously, in your prototype, you're not going to have anything like that. So then you might just pop up a dialog box or another screen that says, pretend the copier just shot out a piece of paper that has the picture you wanted on it. Or pretend it shot out a blank piece of paper. Now what are you going to do? So the key thing that people usually do wrong is they miss on the level of complexity. So as I mentioned, a few people will go overboard and try and do 80 pages or whatever, and that's wrong in the too much work direction. Or some people will come up with 3 pages with not enough on it, and that's too little work or too little of the task. So the goal is pretty much the same as it's been throughout the whole course. It should be around 10 different screens, around 30 controls. It's really hard to say across all the different kinds of devices you guys have. But it should be about that level of complexity. So there's one style of prototype is called a wireframe. It's called that because most things are just represented by their outlines. So you have basically frames that look like they're made out of wires. In this case, you don't need to have final graphics. You can just have placeholders. You can have something that says logo. You don't have to have any colors. But the key requirement, again, is to have enough functionality to do the tasks that you've listed. We want the labels on the pages you do to be real ones, right? So don't say lorem ipsum or other pretend things. If you have a big block of text that's like product information or description of this product that's really not part of the task, it's okay for that to be pretend. But to the extent that there's a major button, even if it's not part of your task, it should be labeled with what you intend for it to do. So there's 2 reasons for all these requirements that each page be complete. The first one is that you're going to pretend to do a user study. Well, you might be doing a user study of this prototype. We don't actually require you to do that. And then the user should be equally confused from your prototype as they would be on the real website, right? So if you only had one of these buttons be real and the rest be pretend, then the user says, well, I know which one I'm going to pick on. It's the one that's actually there. Similarly, another reason is because we're pretending that you're going to give these to a professional implementation team, and the goal is that your prototype will guide them on how to implement this for real. So we showed you the TOFM website, which has pretty clear, I mean, it looks kind of like a real website because it has graphics and stuff. This was done by a team of 4 people in 2 weeks. So we obviously don't need you to do that level of detail. So this is way more detail than you need to do. But so again, when we talked about search, it doesn't matter what I put in the search field, I'm going to get the same results. And similarly, when I go to my cart, or if I register, I think there's a register page. Yeah, so the register page is an example of a form that you were asking about. So there are all these fields. It pretty much ignores what I put in them and pretends that that I put in John Doe or something. So that's the level that we're hoping that you'll implement. Okay, we've said this a bunch of times. That's because a lot of people miss it. Okay, so in terms of implementing this, you can pretty much use any tool you want. And the TAs are going to spend the second half of the lecture showing you 4 tools that they like or know about. And so that are certainly some choices. I'm going to show you PowerPoint, which is what most of the class turns out to use because everybody knows PowerPoint. It's not, and it's pretty easy to do prototyping with it. It's not the most functional tool. Some of these other ones are actually easier to make prototypes with, which is why they use them for real HCI methods. We recommend you not try and program this. If you find yourself trying to write Java code or JavaScript code or C# or anything like that, chances are you're going too much into the implementation. That's not expected. You'll never finish it in a week if you try and program it in Java. Whereas if you're just drawing some screens with Photoshop or Balsamiq, there's no reason that it should take you very long. Another important point is there's a variety of machines in the class. Most people seem to have Macs, but there are a reasonable number of PCs. And so everything, and remember, we're going to give your program to your classmates, and we can't try and make sure that we're going to give it to another classmate who happens to have a Mac or a PC. That's just too impossible to deal with. So your output must run across both a Mac and a PC. How can you do that? Well, almost all these programs will output a PDF, which is pretty straightforward. You can kind of assume, does everybody have PowerPoint? All the Mac people, right? So it's probably, you can assume everybody has PowerPoint. You guys have PowerPoint, right? So you can output a PowerPoint, you can output as PDF, you can output as a web page, HTML. Some of these tools will do that. If you use something like OmniGraffle that's Mac only, then you'll have to make sure that you can output to PDF or something that people can click through. Same with Visual Studio or any PC-specific tool. Last year, somebody used ActiveX controls in their Visual Basic prototype. That was a big mess. So try to make sure that your tools are not machine-specific. Okay. So these are the ones we're going to demo. So Balsamiq that we're going to demo comes in 2 versions. There's a free download. A lot of these tools have free 30-day trial downloads that you can try out. Luckily, there's not 30 days left for the end of the course, so that's plenty of time. 1 year, there was a tool that only had a 1-week demo. That wasn't quite good enough because you need to use it again for homework 6, but 30 days is plenty of time. Or we also, CMU has an online student account for Balsamiq, and if you're interested in using that, just email me and I'll make an account for you. And InVision also is a free tool that you can download if you want to try and learn a new tool. We'll demonstrate Acture, but there's lots and lots of other ways to do this. So if you want to try out some of these other tools that people have used, that's perfectly fine. One of our alumni who works for Verizon said, oh, they do lots of prototyping. They tend to use Photoshop and Illustrator. Illustrator's not so good because it doesn't do click-through prototypes, so I wouldn't recommend it. But there's some brand new tools, Flinto, InVision, Proto.io, that we're not going to talk about, but you can try if you want. If you want to find out what kind of tools there are out there, all you have to do is search on Google for wireframe tools or prototyping tools, and you'll get all sorts of lists. This Cooper website, one of our alums is actually keeping that up to date, and it currently lists like 20 different tools you could pick from. So this is a really common task. So I did a survey a few years ago, and sure enough, 77% of people prototype on paper. And that's that's one of the reasons we made sure that you had some experience doing that. Visio, PowerPoint, Dreamweaver, Acture, OmniGraffle. So a lot of these other tools are quite popular. And so this was done a few years ago. This is from 2010. So tools like Balsamiq aren't up here, but they're rapidly gaining in popularity. Okay, so let me show you how to use PowerPoint. And PowerPoint has all sorts of amazing features that you probably don't know about unless you've actually tried to do some of this stuff that make it surprisingly effective for some of these things. Probably you've all tried, and this is Photoshop 2013, I think, but none of these features are new. They've been moved around, annoyingly, but they're all go back at least to 2007, and they're on the Mac versions as well, although, of course, they're in different places. So everybody knows how to add a shape. Let's add a rounded button. Okay, and now we can put some text on it. We'll call it button, but you could call it whatever you want. And then you can use all of the usual mechanisms for, deciding the color and where it is and things like that, but I'll just leave it. Now the key part that we're going to do is make it into a hyperlink to make it go to a different place. So pretend this is one page of my user interface. And what we're going to do is add a hyperlink. So normally hyperlinks, you think of them as going to the web. But one of the choices, come back. One of the choices is a place in this document. So normally you would go to a web page and you just type the URL. But one of the choices for hyperlinks is place in this document. And it gives you a list of all the files, all the slides. So these are all the slides in this presentation. And up at the top of the list are some special things, first slide, last slide, next slide, and previous slide, which is also kind of useful. So let's say we wanted to go to Happy Thanksgiving slide. So I just click on that and say OK. And then if we go to runtime, now we have a button that has a hyperlink that if I click on it, it goes to slide 2. Okay? So you can use that mechanism to pretend this is the search button and go to a page where you have all the search results and things like that. So now we're in the wrong place. Let's go back to where we were. So I've already set one up here. So this one goes to where? This one just goes back to the previous slide. So if I go to runtime, so if I'm here and I go here, and then this one goes back, and so it goes to this previous slide that I was on. Okay, is that clear? Yeah?
That go back, that's going to the previous slide. That's not right.
Yes.
Slide 7 to slide 10. Go back to slide 9.
I'm glad you asked that question. That is the next slide. Nope. Wait. Yes. That is the next slide. Right. Good question. So, unfortunately, if you looked at the list for the hyperlinks, up here, it does not, oh, come on. It only has first slide, last slide, next, and previous, which are in numerical order. However, there's a totally different feature, which I don't know why, it's totally different, called Insert Action. Okay? So, and it's described on this slide here. If you do an Insert Action, then you can use the hyperlink, which has many more options. This makes no sense at all, but this is the way it is. And one of these is last slide viewed. Right? And so this is a really good way of going back from somewhere, and it'll go back to wherever you came from. Right? So if we put a button with last slide viewed on the Thanksgiving page, then when we push that button, it would go back to where we were. Right? And so we can just do that. Last slide viewed. Okay. Actually, let's make a copy of this. I think that works. That if you copy things, and we'll paste it down here. And I guess we might as well say go back. I don't want to spend too much time making it pretty because you get the idea. Yeah. So where do we make that? Here, button. So we make button, it goes to here, and we click on go back, and it goes back to where we were. Okay, so pretty surprisingly straightforward if you know where to find it, but nobody knows these features because they're so weird. Another key thing, okay, this was insert action. Yeah, so what you're going to do, obviously, is create a slide for each page of your application, but you may need multiple slides for the same page. For example, if there's a button on the page that shows logged in versus not logged in, or if you want to have a setting and show the different values of the setting, then you might need multiple pages for the same page. You can add transitions and stuff like that, but you're only supposed to make it look like the real interface. So if you were going to have a acute fade feature in your actual application, then you could use fade on PowerPoint. Otherwise, you wouldn't use those kinds of things. It turns out that you can even add buttons and text fields and so forth in PowerPoint, okay, which doesn't make much sense in terms of a presentation. But you can only do that by turning on this developer tab, which probably most people have turned off because it's not particularly useful. And so to actually turn it on, you have to go to File Options and go to the Customize ribbon. And this is not checked by default. And so then you have to check this, and then you'll get that ribbon. Okay. On previous versions of PowerPoint, it looked different. It was in a different place. And I have on this slide how it looked in 2007. And then here it's 2010, 2013 on the Macintosh. I don't know where it is, but you can certainly do a Google search if you can't find it. So what can you do with that? Okay, well, it's here. So if we go to the developer bar, then up here in this controls section, there are a bunch of things like checkboxes and buttons and radio buttons. It turns out to make them do anything, you have to write code. But remember, you don't actually have to make the input fields do anything, right? So if you wanted a checkbox for use the same address as a shipping address, you could just put in a checkbox and say, okay, I'm just going to ignore it. The user's supposed to check it, and if they do, then that's great. The way that you add things is you click on this, and then you drag them out. And so here's another checkbox. And in order to change the label and so forth, unfortunately, you can't do it directly. You have to use the property sheet up here. It's also on the right-click menu. Wake up. Property sheet. And I don't see where it went. And the property sheet looks like this. And you can use it to set the different values. The key thing that you might want on your in your prototype is a text field, because most interfaces, if you're doing websites or whatever, many websites will have text fields that users type in their name or whatever, their address. And again, it's fine to ignore the code that goes with that. Have people type stuff. And one more thing about PowerPoint. Two more things. There's something called the master slide in PowerPoint. If you want the same thing on lots of different slides, you can create a master and then use that in different places. It's a little more complicated. And if you put controls on the master page, then they appear on all the pages that use them with the same value, which is either good or bad, depending on what you're trying to do. And then a following thing, now on almost all PowerPoint shows, if you click anywhere in the screen, it goes to the next slide. You don't really want that if you have a prototype, right? Because then the users click in the wrong place and they go somewhere incorrect. And you can turn that off, which is really annoying if you're giving a PowerPoint show, because then you have to use the arrow keys. And that is in different places in Office 2007 and 10 and 13. They moved this checkbox, annoyingly, but now it's on transitions, and it's right here, advanced slide on mouse click. If I turn that off, then, whoops, go away. Now if I click on the slide, it doesn't actually go to the next slide. So this makes it much more like a prototype where you have to click on an actual button or a link or whatever, some kind of control in order to go to the next slide. So be sure to turn this button off in your PowerPoint prototype. And there's also a link down here to a blog entry that basically says exactly the same thing. Okay. There's this great example that I have linked here that explains this. It's a little old, so it does have an old version of PowerPoint that it's using. So here's, and this is just done as a an example. So this is a PowerPoint file that you can download, and one of the things that's kind of wrong with this one is that she didn't make links of everything. So you can kind of tell what you're supposed to do, because only one thing works on every page, by moving your mouse around until you find something you can click on. Right? But this one has a hover behavior. You can define a hover behavior if you want. So there's some links up here. Oops, sorry. Let's go back. Now these annotations on the side, that was a little confusing for some people last year. You're not supposed to put annotations in your prototype. Okay, we don't want them there. We want them in the README file. So when you give your interface to your classmates, they have to know what to do. And so you're going to put in your README file the tasks that you've been doing all along. It's fine to just copy and paste them in from the previous homeworks. And any kind of instructions like this that you want the user, the tester, to know about. But don't put them in the PowerPoint itself. That makes it it's too confusing what's supposed to be in the actual user interface and what are your annotations that you're trying to tell the user about. So this is a kind of a good example about how you can make a PowerPoint file look like a prototype. Okay. Any questions about using PowerPoint? And there's lots of good examples on the web if you want to find out about how to use some advanced PowerPoint features. And also, I'm pretty much of a PowerPoint guru personally. So the key problem with PowerPoint that you'll see is also true of some of these other things is basically if you have lots of options. So if you want to show something on and off and something else on and off, and that's basically you need 4 different pages to show all of the different possible combinations of things there and not there. And so that might involve 4 pages for that option, for those 2 options, and then if you have another one, then you get 8 pages, and it gets to be ridiculously awkward. The other problem with PowerPoint is if you decide, I really need a new page, and you try and stick it in the middle, then sometimes all of your links then will be broken. Because if you go to slide 12 and then you add a new slide 11, then slide 12 is no longer the right place. And PowerPoint doesn't have any help with that. So it's really important, kind of as a hint, that before you start adding all your links, try and put in placeholders for all your pages. So then your links it'll be easier to get all your links to the right place and not have to keep editing them. Okay? Great. Okay, so the TAs now are going to spend a few minutes on a bunch of different other prototyping tools that they like and that they use as part of their work. And let's start with Ajayan.
Hi everyone, I'm Ajayan. I'll talk a little bit about Balsamiq. So it's a really quick wireframing tool. You can really easily find elements that you would normally find on a website or a mobile interface and you can drag and drop them into mockups and create them rapidly. Interestingly, you can create click-throughs and export them as PDFs. So in terms of using it on Mac versus PC, it's really convenient. Yeah, Professor Myers has already discussed how you can use the web version, and the desktop app is also available for both Mac and PC, and it has a 30-day trial. It's really good for quick wireframing, but if you want really polished mockups where you want to create your own elements, then I suggest using Illustrator or Sketch. So I'm just going to show you a demo of how you can use this tool.
So Illustrator or Sketch to make pages to import, or?
Yeah, to create mockups. Not so much for click-throughs, but to create mockups which you would then use in InVision. Right. So this is a web project that Professor Myers has already created for me. This will be your view when you register and log into a project. So yeah, I'm just going to add a new mockup. So this is where you can find all the elements you want. Let me start with an iPhone skin. You can just type it in here and you'll find whatever you want here. So yeah. Now let me add in a top bar, a rectangle, which I can put in here. Yep. Okay, this is irritating. Yep, and then I want to add in a title to put into that top bar. So yeah, most of the names of the elements are quite obvious, so you can just put them in whenever you. Oops. Yep. And it has this aligning tool, so it's quite convenient to center or left align or right align text. So yeah, here you can, like, you have this kind of an inspect view where you can change the size of elements and whatever formatting you want. Yep. Okay, let me add in a couple of input fields. Let me just type input, yeah. So let's assume this is a login screen. So then I'll add a couple of labels which say username and password. So I just type in label here. And then I want a login button that goes to the next screen. So I search for a button, and then yeah, this pointy button looks good. So yeah, but I want the point to face in the other direction because I'm going forward. So I'll just change this. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, the smaller size screen is messing with what I planned. Yeah. I'm just going to name this login. All right. So now, if you want to show interaction, let's say I want to show the next screen after the login screen. I need to add a new mockup and then show what is the next state after this. So let me first save this mockup. Yeah, let me just, for now, call it new mockup. And then I go back and then I add a new mockup here. All right. But I don't want to start everything from scratch again because I already have a generic outline. So I can group these elements here. I pick the group option here. And then I'll name it outline and then convert it to a symbol. Oops, I already have something here. Okay, outline 1. All right. So now when I want to add a new mockup, I don't have to start from scratch. I can look in my symbol libraries and then I can just find, yeah, this one, outline 1. I can copy and paste this here. Yep. So then, yeah, let me assume this is the second screen after I've logged in. Let's say that the second screen has an image. So I'll add an image in the center. You can you can add an actual image by here looking into site assets. I'll show you how to get into site assets later, but you can upload whatever images you want into there and then use it from there. And then let me show you a form field. So let me add a checkbox group. This might look overwhelming at first, but it's quite simple. You just keep messing with this stuff till what you see is what you get. So yeah. So now none of these are checked. Let me save this mockup. I'll just change the name because they're duplicates. All right. Now I want to create a third mockup where I want to show one field checked. So I want the second mockup where the user will actually check a box, and then in the third one I'll show a state where it's actually checked. So now since the third one is nearly identical, I'm just going to clone this mockup. And then I'll save this. All right. And then here I'm going to I'm going to show this as checked. Oops. Yep. All right. Now I'll show you how to link these pages so that you can create a click-through. So on the first page, I have this login button. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. I have this login button. I just click on it, and then here under links I can pick the mockup to link it to. So I pick mockup 1, and then here yep. Yeah, here I want the user to click on, say, indeterminate, and then when they do, it goes to mockup, to the next mockup. So yeah. All right. So one way to test it is using the viewer here, but I'd rather show you how to export it to a PDF and test it that way. So I'm going to close this, and now you're in the project view. You can export it to a PDF here. All right. So now when I open this, I've already linked the login page, so I can click on this. It goes here.
Click on the size thing.
Oops. Yep.
Click on the left.
Oops. Yeah. Okay. So now when I click login, it goes to this page. Now I want to show that I'm checking this. So yeah, this is how you can show different user states in a click-through. Yeah, I just wanted to show you a couple of more things. So right now, this is the sketch view, which just gives you a good idea of the layout. But there's not really any color, and it kind of looks like it's hand-drawn. So if you want to make it look somewhat better, you can go into view if it comes up. Oops. I'm sorry. Okay, so you can change the skin from sketch to wireframe, and then you'll get something that's slightly more high fidelity, and you can modify colors. For example, when you click on this, you can like change the color here and stuff, and it's going to give you a better look overall. Now, a couple of more things I want to show you. Let's say that, so right now, most of what you want here is based on the iOS symbols and stuff. Let's say you want something that you're not able to find here in terms of elements or containers. Okay, let me try an icon here. This is to show you what is already there. So now when you double click on this, oops. Yeah, so here you can search for pretty much any icon you want, and most of them are there. But let's say you want something that's Android specific. Let's say I want the Android keyboard on it. So there's a bunch of projects. I've given a link in the slides to one such project, which is Mockups to Go. So then here you can like find whatever control you want. Let's say I want the Android controls. I can download this, this is a Balsamiq specific type file, and then I'll just save whatever I've done. Yeah, so now now under assets, I can upload a project asset, which is this Android controls. In fact, if you want to add any images or anything external, this is where you'll add it, under project or site assets. Okay, I'm going to go back and yeah, so now when I go into my project assets, symbols, yeah, I have these symbols here now. So now I can pick from any of these Android symbols. Let's say I want this keyboard. And then I can add this to my mockups here. So this is how you can get some external symbols into. Sorry. Yep, that's about it. I've added some links to documentation and tutorials. It's pretty easy to find whatever you want on Balsamiq, just Google it. That's it. Thanks. I think Stephanie's next with InVision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Okay.
Just go to InVision.com, and it's free, but you can only have like a limit of one active project. If you want, you can upgrade to a student plan for free also. I think you just email them, and then you can have 3 active projects. So InVision is a little different than all the other prototyping tools in the fact that you can only upload like you can't create screens or modify screens in InVision. You have to make it beforehand. And so I would suggest using Illustrator or Photoshop or any other drawing tool that you know to create the screens beforehand. And then what it does, it makes it a clickable, click-through prototype afterwards. So you have to upload the screens as JPEG or PNG images and files and drag it in there. So the way it works is, I'll do a demo later, but the way it works is you just create a new project, select the device that you are going to be using. So for example, if it supports mobile screen sizes, desktop, tablet, and so on. Then afterwards, you upload the screens and make sure that they're the right dimensions. And then there's a build mode where you can link all the screens together by clicking through. And it also supports gestures and transitions, and it's all really easy to do. So I'm gonna do a demo. Oops. Hold on. So, let's see. So this is InVision. So if you the screen is so, I have to fit it. Okay, so basically you can create a new project here. You name it test, or whatever your project is called, and then you can select the device that you want. So I'm gonna do iPhone and prototype. So here you can drag and drop images. Actually, I'm working on a project, so I thought that I could just do it here. So these are some PNGs that I have exported from Illustrator, and so then I'm just gonna drag and drop it here, and with that, it just uploads all the screens for you. And then
Make it higher resolution so you can get screen.
how do I make it higher resolution?
So go back to system preferences.
Okay.
Display. Hit scale.
This one? Okay, cool. I think this will make things a lot easier. So yeah, so you have all these screens that you've uploaded, and so if you click on the first screen that you want to use, it'll send you to this page. So there's different modes. This is the preview mode, if you can see on the bottom here. And then there's the build mode. So you would want to go to the build mode, and that's where you create hotspots or links to link up all the screens. And it's really simple. If you want to create a link, you just click and hold, and it'll make this box. And then it'll ask you where you want it to link to. So then you select, and then you can select any other screen that you've uploaded. So for example, if I want it to link up to the second page, I can do that. And then there's the gestures. For mobile, it supports tapping and swiping. If you're doing a web, then it's only going to be clicking or hover. But so if I click tap, there's also transitions that supports. You can slide, push, flip. There's a lot of cool transitions, but I'm just going to do instant. And then I click save. So now if you go back to preview mode, if you click on this screen, it'll send you to the next screen. And so then you can link up all the screens that you want to make it a clickable prototype. And it's important to, I guess, name the screens so that you keep them organized. It'll make things easier for you when you're trying to connect them all together. There's also some other cool things. There's a fixed footer on the bottom here. So if you're going to have a menu on the bottom, that's always going to be there. So that if you're scrolling, that bottom column will always stay. You can use the fixed footer or the fixed header. And then there's also hotspot templates. And what hotspot templates do is it saves you a lot of time if you're going to be using the same, I guess, hotspots. Then it'll save them, and then you can just apply them. And yeah, I guess I can do a few more. If you wanted to do the login page, you just do that. And then I would want it to go to this next page. But maybe I'd want it to dissolve. So I would save that. And so now if you want it to go back to, it would go here, and then you click login, and then it'll send you to the next page. And so it's pretty simple and really easy to use. And it's nice because it almost looks like a real working prototype. And I'm going to also do one for the web. So there's actually a lot of demos. If you create an account, it comes with a lot that you can just play around with and figure out how to use. But for this one, it's you can, there's a lot to, hold on. It's really similar, the same thing as mobile, but it doesn't have tapping or sliding. It supports click and hover. But yeah, let's go back to I can't find my PowerPoint. It's running. it. Should I change it back to? Well, it seems like it disappeared. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Slideshow.
Okay, cool. All right, so then I'm just going to go through the pros and cons. Like I said, it's really easy and quick to use. It supports basic gestures and transitions, but you have to, it only supports like full screens. Like you have to upload the image to Envision using some other, like you have to create it using some other tool. And then there's limited functionality, so like you can only tap on the screen or slide on the screen, but it makes really nice prototypes. And it also has other features. It supports sharing and collaboration. Oh, I forgot to show you, but it's really easy to share and do user testing with it because it creates a link for you. And the link you can just copy and paste it and send it. And if it's a mobile that you want to do user testing on for the device, you can actually send that link to your phone, and then you can have it on your phone, and you can. It supports the swiping and tapping and everything. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So like when you do like the hover thing, does it send you to like a whole new full screen, or does it like display like a image on top of that one?
So it has to be the full screen. It's different than all the other ones that you can't have like, it's not assets, it's not like different parts of the screen. You have to upload full screens. Yeah.
Alright. Hi everyone, I'm Angela. I'll be playing Ryan for the Acture demo. If you have any questions, I put his email on the last slide, so you'll probably be better off asking him. Anyways, so Acture is a wireframe and prototyping tool that you can download, so it's not on the internet. It's very similar to Balsamiq, actually. So it's a tool for creating dynamic wireframes. You can make your like higher fidelity mockups on Acture, and they have lots of widgets and libraries, so everything is almost drag and drop, so it's really easy for you. So this is what the layout looks like. You've got your sitemaps on the left, your widgets on the left bottom, you've got a master panel, lots of properties on the right, and then the main screen in the center. So I'll go through each of these components. So the first is widgets. So there's pre-made widgets for you already. There's buttons, navigation, menus, form fields, tables, anything you probably need for a mockup. Master pages is kind of like the master templates in PowerPoint. So if you create like a navigation bar in the master template, you can recreate it on every page that you use, so you don't have to keep doing it over and over again. Dynamic panels I'll go into later, but basically it's also sort of like a template. So say you have tabs, you don't have to recreate each tab. It is like a template to use for each tab. And then preview and publish, obviously you can create an interactive app like on your local host server. So you can run through it with people, and something that Acture does really well is that it can also export in HTML and CSS, so kind of like Dreamweaver, if you've used that, it'll create the code for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. So for widgets, they have the list of widgets, and you basically drag it straight into that main screen. And you can drag it around, resize it. You can add interactions to the widgets also. So like say if anyone has used JavaScript before, you can give it an on-click action or an on-move action. So say I click the button, then it should bring me to another page or pop up an error button or something. Master pages, like I said, is sort of like a template. You can make global changes. So if you want to change something in navigation that like switches buttons around, you can just change it in the template and it'll change it everywhere that you placed it. Dynamic panels, I explained a little bit earlier, and a good way to show you is see here, like if you have men, women, and decor as tabs, you can create a dynamic panel template for each one so that you don't have to go through and place all of these objects. Same with here, like if you have sort of an accordion type of layout. And for testing your UI, there's preview, not sure what the middle one is, and the last one is publish, which exports to HTML and CSS. Preview is sort of like running a localhost server on your computer. You can run through it with like a user. So Reasons is versatile, it's efficient, and you can get a 30-day free trial. After that, you have to get a student license or pay for it. And if you need help, that's Ryan's email. And then I don't have Extra on my own laptop, but I will show you a YouTube video tutorial of it.
So, the main advantage of Axure are these dynamic panels. So like you were asking, can you have something that changes in place with the previous two tools, PowerPoint or Balsamic? You can't do that, or InVision. But Axure does have these panels that can change in place, which makes it a lot more powerful, also a lot more complicated. So it's kind of the obvious trick.
So I will show you the video first.
In this advanced dynamic panels demo, we'll show you how to use the events on a dynamic panel to prototype an accordion control. Here are the widgets that will make up the accordion. Each section has a header and content. Since the content will be shown and hidden dynamically, we'll put each one in a dynamic panel using Convert to Dynamic Panel. And set these dynamic panels to hidden by default. On each section header, we'll add a case to the on-click event to toggle the visibility of its content panel. When we show the content from one section, we want to move the sections below it down. Let's put each section into a dynamic panel. And move each section into its default position. Now that everything is in place, and we have our interactions to show and hide the content, we want to add interactions to move the dynamic panels. Anytime section 2 moves up or down, we want section 3 to move with it. To do that, we'll add a case to the onMove event of section 2 to move section 3 with this. Now let's go into section 1 and use the onShow and onHide events on the content panel to move the sections beneath. We need to know the height of the content panel since that is the amount we want to move the other sections. In the onShow event, we'll move section 2 down by 120 pixels. And in the onHide of the panel, we'll move section 2 up by 120 pixels. Remember that the onMove event on section 2 handles moving section 3, so we don't need to move that panel here. Now do the same for the onShow and onHide of the section 2 content panel. Since section 3 is the last section, we don't need to add these interactions. Let's generate the prototype and check it out. Clicking on each of the headers shows the content and pushes the sections below it down. And clicking on them again hides the content and moves everything back up. And that's how to create an accordion control with dynamic panels. If you have questions, email us at support@axure.com or tweet us at AxureRP.
So that's Axure, and for my part of the presentation, I'll be doing HTML and CSS. Super simple. HTML and CSS has so much to it. I'll just be teaching you going through sort of how to do a simple page with like divs and buttons. Sorry. Okay. So the first things first, HTML is written in tags, so everything that you have in HTML is in a tag. So the format of the tags is you have the tag name from, what is it, less than bar, I guess, and you can give it a bunch of options. So the options can be based on what the tag is. So like if it's a button, buttons have specific options, or you can give it class names or ID names, or even JavaScript functions. Sorry. That's like the general format of a tag, and it's kind of hard to explain until I go through some. So some of the tags that you can have are headers, paragraphs, divs, buttons, links, tables, form fields, images, all kinds of things. W3 Schools does a really good tutorial on HTML if you want to go through that. So the general file structure of HTML, there's always a doc type HTML, so that when you render the file, it knows what type of file it is. And then you have the tag that wraps the entire file, and it's HTML. Under that, you can have head. Header tags is where you link to other files, or you like have title attributes. So for example, title, page title would be the words that you see on the tab when you go through your tabs in Chrome or Safari. That's your page title. Link source is if you have a style sheet CSS, which I'll go through after HTML. This is where you link it, or else the HTML doesn't know where to go look for its styles. And then lastly, if you also know how to do JavaScript, you would also source your JavaScript in the header. After head typically is body, and body is where the rest of your HTML code will likely go. I will go through an example of HTML later, but just to go through some general CSS. Actually. For HTML, if you guys already know, all elements have a name. So like body, right, all the tags that I just went through, but you can also give it a class name. And class names can be given to more than one element in a file. So say I name the class like with highlight. I can also do with highlight for several other elements. There's another way to name your elements, and that's IDs. And IDs can only be named to one element in each file. And this is so that you can have more specific CSSs. And CSS is written by selecting those class names and IDs. So class name is selected with a dot before the class name, and ID is with a pound sign or hashtag before the ID name. And that's how you specify this is the element that I want to style. So CSS describes how the HTML will look, or else the HTML will render in a standard way on the browser. So you can, for CSS, you can describe the height, the weight, the width, font, color, padding, spacing, vertical alignment, et cetera, et cetera. Basically anything you can think of to style it on the page. A lot of styling is also done with JavaScript if you want it to be dynamic, but I won't be going through that today. And the general structure is, say if you wanted to style something with an ID, you do pound ID name, open brackets, and then all of your options sort of like a key value pair, and then you close bracket. And then in the parentheses there, I just wanted to make it clear that PX in CSS is for pixels, so you style everything in pixels. There's also EMs, which is a little bit more confusing, but for the most part, everyone uses PX, which is pixels, or EM. And where do you write your HTML and CSS? There's a couple text editors. One of the most popular ones is Sublime Text. You've probably seen it before. There's also Brackets, which is very similar to Sublime. I personally use Brackets. Adobe Dreamweaver is a place where you can drag and drop elements, and it'll turn it into HTML and CSS for you. And then you can obviously also just do it in Terminal if you open some kind of text editor in Terminal, like Emacs or Vim. Probably less ideal, it's harder to read it there. But I will go through an example with you to make it more clear. Not questions yet. So I use Brackets. This is what Brackets looks like. Oh, wow. Let's see if I can change the theme. Yeah, that's better. The reason why I like to use Brackets is because if you have a static page, something that doesn't run on an app, like Node.js or something, you can go ahead and click this for a live preview. So this is just a simple, really ugly page I threw up just to show you HTML, but I'll go through this with you. And the great thing about preview is like, say I wanted to change the red one to, what's another color, yellow. I can go ahead and come back and it changes automatically, whereas with other localhost servers, you have to refresh or restart the server. And that's why I like brackets. It also looks really nice. It's easy to use. Anyways, I'll change this back to red. So I created an empty file. I think we have 10 minutes, so I'll try to go through as much as I can in class. So for all HTML files, you always want to start with an index page, which is usually your home page. So I'll create a file called index.html. And remember from what I showed in the beginning, doctype HTML is always the start. And we want to give it a wrapper of HTML tags. The entire file will be within HTML. And we want to start with the header tags. So for head, we'll say title is example. And if we preview this now, you'll see that the title here on the tab is called example. There's nothing here yet because we haven't written anything. But we'll do link. And link is for the CSS, so we'll say link type, link href. Href just means the file that we're referencing, and I'll call it index.css. I haven't created this file yet, but I will now. Oops. So we'll create a new file called index.css, which is where we'll write the CSS later. And then since we're not doing JavaScript, I won't put in the JavaScript tag. And where we have all the divs from the previous from the example I showed you, all the boxes, that'll all go in body. So in body, a div is, this is kind of hard to explain. You can basically wrap anything in a div. A div is basically kind of an arbitrary rectangular space that you can put any elements in. A div itself doesn't have any height or any width. You have to give it the height and the width. So I'll show you, if I just create a div, and we go back to the refresh page, there'll be nothing there because technically the div is just an element, but it has no height or width, so it doesn't technically exist on this page yet. So div, and we'll say this will be the red box that we saw earlier. So I'll give it a header. So H1 is the header. Headers go in H1, H2, H3, H4. That doesn't necessarily mean that it sizes it for you, like H1 is bigger than H2, but the purpose of tags really is to help screen readers and other things like that go through and see the hierarchy of your page. So let's just say H1 this is the red box. And for the most part, all paragraph text should go in the P tags, and we'll just say this is the red box. This has no styling yet, so when we go back, we will only see the text. We won't see where the actual box is or how big this is. So if we go into this, let me actually just create the other divs really fast to go through this a little faster. So this is the blue box, and this is the orange box. So they'll all show up here. And in the CSS, you see how these are all divs? In CSS, we can go ahead and style all divs at once if we want. So we can say the height is like 300 pixels, and the width is also 300 pixels. And even though it'll look bigger here, refresh. Maybe it's already 300. But if we give it a border, you'll be able to see the separation between border one piece. Actually, hold on 1 second. I always forget the exact wording of this. I'm going to copy it over here in case I made a mistake. Okay. You always want this relation style sheet so that it knows what it's linking. And for some reason, I always forget that that's the syntax for it. Anyways, so now you're able to see our CSS in play. You see there's 300 by 300 pixel boxes with a border around them. And then something important to show you is how to create links between pages. So there's a tag called nav, which is navigation. So we can say there is a div with the word like link to another page. I'm going to put that in p tags. So it should show up here, link to another page. It's in a div, but if we wrap this around the A tag, A is to link to other places, Actually, we don't even need the div here. Sorry. If we wrap this in an A tag, so ahref, we'll link it to another page that we'll create. Say it's like test.html. And we put the text inside the A tag, like this. Can you guys see that, or should I make that bigger? You'll see when we go back here that this is a link. It doesn't link to anything yet because I haven't created the test page, but if we create a test page called test.html, say this is the test page, and we can make another link here that goes back. Then if we click link to another page, we get to the test.html page, which is just another HTML file just like our index page. And if you click back to home, it takes you back to whatever you linked it to. Okay. And to show you some more styling, I'll put CSS on one side, HTML on the other. Okay, so this is our HTML page. And if we want to style classes, say these will have border, right? Class equals have border. And this div class equals have border. And this class, you'll see we don't give it that class. Sorry, this div, we won't give that class. Then here, if I want to style only the two that have borders, then I can say dot have border. And we'll say only those can have the black border. So I'll put that here. And that will show here. So this orange box doesn't have a border. And if I want to style each box specifically, I can say this ID is equal to, what is it, red. ID equals blue. ID is what, orange. So if I want to give the red box only a red background, then I do pound, hashtag, whatever, red, and I say background, color, all the CSS selectors and stuff you can find online. W3 Schools is really good, like I said before. There's also like Code Academy, other things. So background color, I'll just say red. You can also give it RGB values or hex values, but it also has default values like red, orange, green, blue, yellow, purple. Say red. So now if we go back and refresh, the red box will have a red background. And say we don't want the text to be aligned to the left, we can do text align center as well, and everything will go to the center. This is the general sort of way you would prototype something in HTML and CSS. Obviously, will likely look nicer than this and have more elements than this, but in general, this is just how you do HTML and CSS. Have any questions? A good website that I used a couple years ago was Dash by General Assembly. It's a free tutorial in HTML and CSS, and it even does some JavaScript. But cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
RTAs or fortunately, because of the holidays, I sent everybody an email. We're not going to have office hours Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Stephanie has agreed to do one tomorrow morning at a special time just for this week on Tuesday. And then because the rest of the homeworks are due on Monday, we're going to move Stephanie's office hours to Wednesday. It doesn't make any sense to have them on Monday. And all this is on the staff page if anybody needs help. And of course, we'll be monitoring the Piazza and our emails over the holidays if you have questions about how to do some of this stuff. And the instructions for this assignment are much simpler than the other ones. It's basically just make the website, the prototype, whatever your system is. And the only trick is to make sure when you're turning it in that you turn in everything you need. Don't forget, make sure if you have images, if you do an HTML site, you know that the pictures are separate. Some of these prototype systems will link to external files or whatever. So make sure everything's there. We recommend you take what you're turning in and put it on a different computer and make sure it works when you move it to a different computer. Just because that's how the TAs are gonna, and, are gonna run it, and your classmates. Any questions? Okay, I hope everybody has a happy holiday. See you next Monday.